Let's go. Oh my god! Woo! Yeah, baby!
Alright, that should be enough for me to make a video. I don't need to pull anymore. Okay guys, I can explain. Hey guys, Atomic here. As you might have seen from a bit earlier, I pulled 7 copies of Yelan for science to find out how powerful she truly is, of course. Anyways, Yelan is a powerful Hydro character since launch, able to meaningfully challenge Xingqiu for his place as the character with the best Hydro application. Will Xingqiu finally be dethroned after a 2-year-long reign? Let's find out together today. Let's begin with a quick rundown of Yelan's passives. Her first passive functions very similar to Yunjin's, giving her additional HP percentage based on how many different elements are present in the party. Her second passive is very powerful as well. After casting her Elemental Burst, Yelan will give a damage percentage buff to the current on-field character. The buff starts from 1% and ramps up all the way to 50% at the end of her burst. Now onto her skills. Her normal attacks are your standard physical arrows with no additional mechanics. Even though they have really cool animations, they are quite useless due to their normal attack scaling. However, she has a special charge shot. Yelan will enter a breakthrough state after being off-field for 5 seconds, with her glowing bracelet indicating that her special charge shot is ready. Her charge shots deal AoE damage in a small area that scales with her max HP. Honestly, this is what Yoimiya should have been, a girl that makes fireworks and her attacks don't explode. Her elemental skill has a 10-second cooldown and generates either 4 or 3 Hydro Particles. Tapping on the skill makes Yelan quickly dash forward for a short distance and marking all enemies contacted, while holding down her skill will cause Yelan to instead turn invisible and move quickly whilst marking all enemies she comes in contact with again. However you choose to use her skill, Yelan will deal Hydro damage scaling with her max HP after her dash is complete. In addition to this, each enemy damaged by her mark also has a 34% chance to put her in the breakthrough state, and slightly pull smaller enemies towards Yelan while staggering larger enemies like Minotaurs. This skill is honestly as fun to use as it is cool to watch. Just look at this, mercilessly destroying all these hilly trolls and running around the overworld like a lunatic. Her Elemental Burst, which lasts for 15 seconds and has an 18-second cooldown, shoots 3 HP scaling coordinated Hydro attacks either when characters on field normal attacks or when an enemy is damaged by her skill's lifeline mark. Keep in mind that when multiple enemies are damaged by her lifeline mark, her coordinated attacks only proc on one enemy. Oh, and I forgot to mention that the attacks also home in on enemies, so you don't have to worry about them missing. A pretty nice touch, not gonna lie. Finally, let's quickly go through her constellations. Constellation 1 gives her an extra charge on her skill like Xiao or Sucru's Constellation 1. This constellation is as good as it seems, just double the fun of using her skill and provides that nice overworld travel speed. Constellation 2 makes her coordinated attack launch an extra attack every 1.8 seconds that deals 14% of Yelan's max HP as Hydro damage. Overall, a great DPS increase, about 20%. Constellation 3 gives her burst 3 extra levels, which vastly increases her DPS. Constellation 4 increases all party members' HP by 10% for every opponent marking Yelan's elemental skill. This also applies to Yelan herself, which makes her gain more HP and thus deal more damage. Constellation 5 gives her skill 3 extra levels, which slightly increases her DPS. And finally, Constellation 6 makes Yelan's first 5 auto attacks after casting her burst become Breakthrough Barb charge attacks, each dealing 156% of a regular Breakthrough Barb's damage, a very premium but flashy constellation. A center of debate for Yelan is her energy recharge requirement, with Keqing mains insisting Yelan needing at least 200% ER to properly function. This means using both an ER timepiece in combination with an ER subset weapon, and it just compromises too much damage-wise. The only character in this game that scales with energy recharge, Raiden Shogun, barely breaks even with an ER timepiece, and this is considering Raiden's electro damage percent increase passive, Emblem of Severed Fate artifact bonus, and her button slot weapon, the Engulfing Lightning. Think about it like this. Does anyone run both the Sack Sword and an ER timepiece on Xingqiu? Of course not. You'll think that person has lost their mind. So what's the difference about Yelan? Realistically, you would only really need around 160% energy recharge for her to cast her burst off cooldown, and with Raiden Shogun, this number can get as low as 140%. Look at this clip where only Favonia's Warbow is being used. This is just a reminder to never completely trust calculations and for you to take a step back from Fairyland and back into the reality of gameplay. Circumstances change, and nothing is so set in stone. Just choose what is best for your Yelan. With that out of the way, let's talk about how to build Yelan. Yelan's full HP scaling is truly a gift and a curse, as this means her weapon choices are going to be drastically different compared to other characters. Her best-in-slot weapon would be her banner weapon, Aqua Simulacra, which gives her an always-on damage percentage and HP percentage buff, while having the same crit value as the Primordial Jade Cutter. Other 5-star weapons are not actually worth putting on Yelan, as their advantageous high base attack and attack focus effects are completely useless for Yelan due to her full HP scaling. For reference, a 3-star Slingshot has more crit value than the Skyward Harp and only slightly less than that of the Polar Star, meaning that the Slingshot will provide very similar value to those other 2 weapons. If you are a free-to-play player, you're better off either using the Slingshot or some other 4-star option, such as the Fading Twilight, the current event weapon, Favonius Warbow for some team energy recharge, or the Sacrificial Bow to get her Constellation 1 essentially for free. For artifacts, you can either mix and match 2-piece Noblesse Oblige, 2-piece Heart of Death, and 2-piece Tenacity of Amelith sets, or use the 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate set, which is her best-in-slot artifact set. Her preferred main stats are also quite funky. Surprisingly, these 3 combinations actually deal very similar damage to each other when following the standard Kachi main subset distribution, with the standard build of HP Hydro Crit pulling out slightly ahead damage-wise but lacking in some much-needed energy recharge. These are her subset priorities, keeping in mind that extra HP isn't necessarily bad, as at least right now, there is no HP equivalent of Bennett or Sarah, meaning any HP percentage you can get as substats is actually quite valuable. Yelan's role in a team would be very similar to Xingqiu, that is, being a great Hydro applier and bring in huge amounts of off-field DPS. However, there is a huge difference between Xingqiu and Yelan, Yelan's Ascension 1 passive. It encourages Yelan to be in teams of 3 or 4 different elements, pushing her away from mono or duo element teams. One of her best teams would undoubtedly be the Raiden National Team. As if rotated correctly, her second passive's damage percentage buff can be utilized fully by Raiden Shogun alone, adding in tons of extra damage. With 3 unique elements, Yelan would also be getting her near max potential for her personal damage from her Ascension passive 1. She can also be used in Ayaka teams, where her second passive damage buff can once again be taken full advantage of, whilst also bringing in tons of damage and consistently applying Hydro to help keep enemies frozen. Since freeze teams also usually ran with 3 elements, the same bonuses apply as the Raiden National Team above. Yelan would also be great in Hu Tao teams as, once again, you've guessed it, her second Ascension passive. Hu Tao is a character with a relatively short DPS window, once again, perfect to receive the blessing of Yelan's second passive. Yelan's skill also serves as a meaningful rotation time filler, as her skill can potentially tag multiple enemies and apply Hydro on them, readying a big vaporized charge attack for Hu Tao. Finally, let's do a damage comparison between her and the current king of Hydro, Xingqiu. Here are the stats, artifacts, and weapons I use for both Xingqiu and Yelan respectively. Also, keep in mind that this is assuming their respective burst gets max value in the game, 54s for Xingqiu and 36 coordinated attacks for Yelan. Another thing to consider is that neither Xingqiu or Yelan's burst snapshots, meaning neither of them can take advantage of buffs other than shredding, as they are usually off-field during their bursts. And here are the results. Xingqiu, with 50 total swords at Constellation 6 and Talent 13, does a total of 316,300 damage. When buffed by a kazuha with 1000 EM and Viridis Veneer, he deals about 448,000 damage. Yelan, on the other hand, with 36 total coordinated attacks and Talent 10, does a total of 327,320 damage. With a kazuha with 1000 EM plus Viridis Veneer again, she deals about 500,000 damage. As you can see here, Yelan's damage is slightly better here, and expectedly pulls more ahead when buffed by a teammate like Kazuha. However, this is a pure damage comparison, so take it with a grain of salt as this comparison does not take into account for any other utility value. One might just give more than the other one. Is Xingqiu dead in the water because of Yelan? Of course not. but Yelan did dethrone him pretty handily. This doesn't suddenly mean Xingqiu is no longer meta or has become bad. He is still a very strong and viable Hydro character, while Yelan is just an improved version of him. Just imagine though how Abyss and team building will look now that there's 2 of them. I can't wait to see what kind of new team comps and possibilities arise out of Yelan's addition. Mono Hydro soon maybe? Nah, I'm just kidding. This is Atomic, and I'll see you guys in the next one.